Hello friends, welcome to the Soviet Journey channel. At this station of our journey, I would like to give you detailed information about the Erzincan Soviet, the first Soviet government established in Anatolia. This Soviet government, which lived until 1916 in the Erzincan region, which came under Russian rule after the Battle of Erzincan between Tsarist Russia and the Ottoman Empire between July 25, 1916 during the First World War, has an important historical importance. The Erzincan Soviet represents an organizational attempt similar to the new Soviet form of government established in various regions of Russia by pro-Bolshevism soldiers, workers and peasants in Erzincan on the way to the October Revolution. During the October Revolution in 1917, the Erzincan region belonged to Russia, and therefore what happened in the region is directly related to the revolutionary processes. This local Soviet administration, which covered a larger region than today's Erzincan provincial borders and spread to regions as far as Dersim, Erzurum, Bayburt and Sivas, was established in 1916 and lasted until 1921. Both during the rule of Tsarist Russia and after the withdrawal of the Russian armies as a result of the agreement signed by the new Bolshevik administration in Russia, red flags were hoisted on all administrative buildings, and this administration survived for many years. Let's refresh our historical memory and take a look at the Erzincan Soviet process. During World War I, the Ottoman army fighting against Tsarist Russia in the years-long conflict known as the Caucasus Front was defeated in many areas and Ottoman soldiers suffered heavy losses in many places. Approximately 100,000 Ottoman soldiers under the command of Enver Pasha wanted to pass through the Alahukba mountains, but more than 20,000 soldiers froze to death before they could even engage in combat, and tens of thousands were crippled. This dramatic situation in Sarkum changed the fate of the entire war. Approximately 40,000 Ottoman soldiers who were able to cross the mountains attacked the Tsarist Russian army, but suffered a heavy defeat and retreated. Russian armies captured the cities in eastern Anatolia and the eastern Black Sea with the retreat of the Ottoman armies. Russian soldiers came to the Erzincan border. The 28th and 36th divisions of the retreating Ottoman army and the local forces in this region came to the Dersim region and deployed here. In 1917, the Tsarist armies in the Munzur Mountains, Sadak Mountains and Shardakli Gorge were in turmoil due to Bolshevik organizations and the lack of discipline caused by the revolutionary soldiers not obeying the orders of their commanders. Following the developments that began with the February 23rd revolution in Russia, indiscipline in the Tsarist army increased greatly. After the revolution, the government in Transcaucasia fell into the hands of the Special Transcaucasian Committee, and the fate of the war changed. Russian soldiers did not want to fight for Tsarism, and in most places they laid down their weapons because they did not want to fight against civilians. The historical situation before the Erzincan Soviet was like this. In 1917, the October Revolution took place in Russia. Tsarist soldiers set up revolutionary soldiers' councils on the fronts, took over the military hierarchy, and arrested pro-Tsarist generals and officers. Bolshevik soldiers had also taken over the administration of the Russian army in Anatolia. Ashek Samalian, a member of the Georgian Social Democratic Party, was appointed commander of the First Russian Army in Dersim. Samalian, a Bolshevik, formed military units by establishing the First Red Guard Army. This new army administration explained the peaceful principles of communism to thousands of Ottoman soldiers who were prisoners of war and released them. Later, they created many organizations in these regions and encouraged the people of the region to govern themselves and establish administrative units without being subjected to any pressure. After the Bolsheviks came to power, Russia's war on all fronts was clearly stopped. The Bolsheviks told the people of Anatolia, where the Tsarist armies entered, that World War I was an imperialist war, and announced to the world the Sykes-Picot Agreement, a secret agreement, that the main purpose of this war was the sharing of Ottoman lands between Britain, France and Tsarist Russia. The copy of this agreement was published by Trotsky in the Soviet newspaper Izvestia on November 24, 1917, and he announced to the world public that the new Soviet government had withdrawn from this imperialist agreement. The newly established Soviet government in Russia signed the Treaty of Erzincan with the Ottoman government on 17-18 December 1917. According to the agreement, all Russian armies, including the Red Guards, were to withdraw from Anatolian territory within 3 months. However, the Ottoman army would not enter the vacated areas. With this article, local people who wanted to govern themselves would be able to establish Soviet governments here, and Ottoman forces would not intervene here. However, the head of the Ottoman Commission, who was Enver Pasha's uncle, stated that they would not allow the people to govern themselves and said, "This agreement is doomed to remain on paper. These lands will come under Ottoman rule." The fate of the Erzincan Soviet would be determined by its stubbornness in not complying with this agreement. These regions, which became Russian territory at the time of the February Revolution during World War I, were equally affected by the events that took place in other parts of Russia. Bolshevik soldiers arrested their officers, revolted and established new committees, namely Soviets. One of these is the Erzincan Soviet Republic, which was Russian territory during the war. After the armistice of Erzincan, Russian soldiers began to evacuate the lands they captured in Anatolia. During this retreat, they handed over their existing weapons to local forces. This situation paved the way for the establishment of these local councils. In the geography that today covers the Tunceli, Erzurum, Erzincan, Bayburt and Sivas regions, Bolshevik commander Arak Samalian called on Kurdish, Turkish and Armenian notables and workers to gather to establish a system that would govern themselves. Muradov Pasha represented the Armenians, Elisha and Alishan Bey represented the Kurds, and the Mufti of Erzincan represented the Turks. People's representatives were determined by population and sent large numbers of people to the surrounding areas for further expansion of the new Soviet Republic. In his speech at the ceremony, Muradov spoke about the effects of the October Revolution in the world and the region and said, "Turks, Kurds and Armenians are brothers. The imperialists and their local collaborators who made us fight against each other. We forget the pain we suffered and extend our hand of peace. Let all Kurdish, Armenian and Turkish laborers and workers unite and establish our own Soviet. We do not need sultans. Russian workers overthrew the tyrants and established their own governments. Let us unite and form our own government. Lenin and his army support us." Similarly, Kurdish representatives Alishan and Elisha Bey said, "The Workers' Association has taken over the management of the Russian army. The army will withdraw. A Dersim committee should come to Erzincan quickly for Soviet government." Then Alishan Bey came to Erzincan with 2 delegates and a military force of approximately 8,000 people. After the declaration of the new Soviet administration, red flags were hoisted on buildings in the regions. The new Soviet government became a real power in the region with the military, political and economic support of the Russian Social Democratic Labour Party. As a first step, collective farms similar to those in the Soviets were created. Then, military organizations began to be established. The finance law was enacted and it was decided that the taxes would be paid to the local Soviet government, not to the Istanbul government and the Sultan. In addition, the land law was enacted and land began to be distributed to landless peasants. The Ottoman army, which retreated after the armistice of Erzincan, gave weapons to its supporters in the region. The organization called Jamiat Islami, which was one of these supporters and carried out anti-communist activities in the region, was making anti-Soviet propaganda in the region. Red Guards of the Russian army were fighting against these structures. However, the Red Guards had to urgently evacuate Erzincan by the end of February 1918, both due to the agreement and the events that took place in the Caucasus. Armenians living in the Caucasus had established a separate state with its capital in Yerevan and were fighting against the Soviets due to their nationalist ideas. For this reason, the Bolshevik supportership of some Armenians in and around Erzincan was not found very convincing by the Red Guards. On the other hand, socialist mentality was not yet dominant among the Kurds, and Turks still supported the Sultan. For this reason, the Red Guards were forced to retreat without being able to do much against the invasion plans of the Jamiat Islami and the Istanbul government against the Erzincan Soviet. On the day the Red Guards withdrew from Erzincan, Turkish representatives under the Soviet administration declared that they were loyal to the Sultan and invited the 9th Ottoman Army to the region, even though they were a minority in the administration. After this, rumors began to spread that the Ottomans would not comply with the treaty and would invade the region and expel the Armenians from the region. In addition, the Jamiat-i-Islami was now openly calling for war against the Armenians. The Ottoman were holding meetings with these representatives in order to attract the Dersim delegates to their side in order to destroy the Erzincan Soviet. However, the negotiations were inconclusive. Dersim representatives stated that they would remain loyal to the Armistice of Erzincan and made a statement, "We will be against whoever attacks." Although the aim was to resolve the unrest in the region by having the opposing sides surrender their weapons, the Sultan's supporters did not surrender their weapons within a 5-day period. Thereupon, the supporters of the Erzincan Soviet, who surrendered their weapons, took them back again. While events were continuing, the Dersim delegation announced that they would return to Dersim again and said, "The Soviet government is not safe in Erzincan. Let's move the government center to Dersim." Then, the majority of the representatives in the Erzincan Soviet accepted this proposal and decided to transfer the headquarters of the Soviet government to Ovchik. The Soviet government's sphere of influence was surrounded and expanded in every aspect by the Ottoman army. After the withdrawal of Russian troops and Red Guards from the region, the Ottoman army violated the Armistice of Erzincan and moved to the region with the aim of overthrowing the local Soviet governments. After these conflicts, which are known today as the 1918 Battle of Erzincan and the 1918 Battle of Erzurum, were taken with this name in the books, the forces affiliated with the Armenian representatives were defeated and retreated to Yerevan following the Ottoman attacks. The forces in the Ovchik, which were affiliated with the Soviet administration and supported the Kurdish representatives, fought against the Ottoman forces between March and June 1921. This war is Kopgiri Rebellion. After 3 months of fighting, Ottoman forces destroyed Soviet Ovchik in 1921. Yes, comrades, I wanted to give you information about the Erzincan Soviet, which was the first Soviet administration in Anatolia and ruled for about 5 years. I hope this little-known historical process caught your attention and we received a like from you for the video. World War I deeply affected many regions in the world. As one of these effects, the Erzincan Soviet was born and took its historical place as a management experience in Anatolia until its collapse. Although the events that took place during that period are distorted by most sources today, the true history still preserves its place in memories. Soviet experiences found their place in Anatolia, as in many parts of the world. If you have anything you would like to add on the subject, write it in the comments and let's discuss it together. Please do not forget to follow and subscribe to the Soviet Journey for similar videos about the Soviets and world socialist movements. Goodbye for now. Stay in solidarity.